Welcome to the Power Up Your Lunch webinar series featuring Lynn Karazi, the data magician from Data to Profit. Today, we're launching a new series and we're examining the behaviors of business and the data behind them, why SWOTs can be a waste of time. Definitely a head-turning topic. I'm Pat Miller, the Idea Coach and your host of the webinar, and you can see a little bit about me and what I've done right there on the screen. But I'm not who you came here for. You're here to welcome and say hello to the star of the show, Lynn Karazi, the data magician. Say hello to everyone and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Lynn Karazi, thank you for sharing a part of your day with me today. Whether you're watching this live or on a future rebroadcast, that'd be perfect. What I do, I'm the data magician. I take your messy data or the messy data of your customers that you work with, work our magic with it, and turn it into insights and new information that's going to help them make more money. At the end of the day, I'm trying to bring 14 years of Procter & Gamble business analysis and financial leadership experience and offering that to Fortune 500 expertise to small, medium-sized companies. And there's really three areas where I focus on: sales truths, profit insights, and a whole range of strategy services.
Now, this is a new webinar series, and there are a million webinars out there, but Lynn has a unique point of view. And before we dive into the topics that we're going to cover in this series, Lynn, can you share your perspective and your founding premise on the behavior of business and the data behind them?
Yeah, spending so much time in a very large company and walking and eventually end up in a smaller company and then one even smaller than that, you begin to appreciate there's a lot of behaviors in business that are really not explored. They're kind of like you talk about them in a management class, you see them in an organizational design, you talk about them in marketing, but at the end of the day, business is about relationships. Relationships reflect the behaviors that contribute to them, and those behaviors can all be measured. So as I thought about Data to Profit as a company that's helping people turn their data into more money, it just seemed like this is an idea that's been gelling around. I actually kicked it with one of my professors at Duke, and she said, yeah, it sounds like a great name of a book. That was probably 10 plus years ago. And as we've now gotten into the era of COVID and more videos and webinars like this, it almost lends itself to a whole series.
And this series is unique because it's not only using data to make better decision, it's shining a light on bad decisions made when data isn't included. So let's take a look at what's coming up in the future months so you can get an idea about what we're doing. So you talked about some of these business relationships and behaviors, and let's skip forward and look at the different webinars that we're going to do. So today we're doing why SWOTs can be a waste of time.
Yep.
On October 14th, we're going to do, how is your 2021 business plan coming along? Because often while you're planning, you'll do a SWOT. Then we'll build on that November 11th, get the truth about your sales. And I'm going to stop right there because, Lynn, you've got a lot to say about the truth about sales. Can you just talk briefly about what you mean by that?
Yeah, when you think about sales is the ultimate place that the behaviors manifest themselves. When you go out to eat, who determines the size of your check? It's you, your behavior as the customer, and the behavior of your sales rep or your server to really interact with you, help you have a great experience, and really understand what's driving your behavior, how they get more money out of you to have a better time in their restaurant. And when I talk about the truth of sales, it's really trying to figure out how do you get to those customer behaviors, the sales rep behaviors, and really give people insights as to what's driving your sales. A lot of people do it in very traditional ways. I think we've got a different approach here.
And if you just look at the numbers all rolled up, you will completely miss the complexity and the data magic that's inside. The last two things we're going to hit: gross margin magic and IT investment. Does it have an ROI, and how do you calculate that? So you'll see here in the next 5 webinars, we're talking about big things that will save you or make you a lot of money. So during the call, we're going to take your questions, drop into the chat if there's something you'd like to know from Lynn, and we will work them in when we can. But let's get to the business.
All right.
My SWOT analysis can be a waste of time. So Lynn, SWOTs are everywhere. They're common. Like if you don't have a SWOT, you don't have a business. That's how common it seems.
Yes.
And people must believe that they work. But first, let's start just so we're all on the same page. What is a SWOT and what are you supposed to be doing? Like, what is it supposed to do when you get down and actually hold one?
SWOTs are an excellent way to get a sense of where your business is at that particular moment in time and take an assessment of what's happening out in the marketing place. So the strengths and the weaknesses are there. It's all the internal view. So that's your company, its assets, its culture, its priorities, its investments, its people, all those things rolled up into what's working well and what do we have, things to improve upon. And externally, the threats and the opportunities, those are the market conditions. And it's everything from government regulations to what your competitors are doing, the world economic crisis that we're going through. Obviously, COVID is having a huge impact here. So these are the ways that you break it out. And you're really trying to put together a relatively concise summary of what's the internal and external situation you're facing right now, typically as you kick off the planning season.
But that sounds like a good thing. And today's about why SWOTs can sometimes be a waste of time. I'm confused. What do you mean?
Well, and putting that out there as the headline, it is going to catch a lot of people by surprise. But as you said, very early on, SWOT started in the 60s. They've been around for a long, long time. They're widely accepted as a business strategy tool. And as I said, it's a high-level summary where you take the best thinking of the people that are the senior leaders of an organization, and a lot of times people, a level or two down within the organization, because when done well, you're getting a full representation of all the key functions and operations within the business. And it typically tends to be a relatively quick exercise. And so there's a lot of value that comes out of this. And I've done them for businesses, large ones, small ones. I've done them for nonprofits. They work. You get a lot of good stuff out of them. But from our perspective, what hasn't happened, they haven't evolved with the rise of data. And so we've all heard so much in recent years about how data is changing our world. You look at any shopping experience now, how things magically show up on your phone after you've done a quick look for something. And this is the limitations. Because they are quick, they all tend to be qualitative and subjective. And they really are more or less a brainstorming exercise. And because it's done by human beings, going based off what they know right then and there, there is an inherent internal bias from each of those individuals that come. It's human nature. And at the same time, when it can just be a lot of words and thoughts that are put together, it doesn't really point to what should I be doing next. And then ultimately, I think where there's an opportunity to move it back into the planning process a little bit versus its current state when it usually is done.
All right, so I'm with you now. It's not that SWOTs are bad. It's just they're not completed as effectively as they could be. So what are we doing wrong?
So what are we doing wrong? Well, let's talk about, before we get into what's wrong, let's get clear about how they are typically done. As I mentioned before, they are qualitative and subjective. And the way that it's done is kind of like in a lot of other brainstorming exercise. Everyone has their stack of Post-it notes. Okay, so now guys, there's a couple questions to get us thinking about strengths. Okay, so now take 10 minutes, write down everything you think is a strength to our company. Then we'll do the same thing for the opportunities, the weaknesses, weaknesses, and the threats. So we'll do that. Then we'll put all of our Post-it notes up on a board. And they go up there, and then the facilitator typically is the one who begins grouping them all together. And typically people will get 5 or 6 votes. So now that you've got these clumps of ideas, you each have your votes. Now you go voting. And typically what happens then is the ideas or the groupings that have the most votes, they make the final SWOT. Then somebody takes that final SWOT, summarizes it, puts it together, and then out of that, probably then a smaller group gets together and say, okay, now what are the specific strategies and executional items that we want to start building underneath here that reflects our plans? Yep. But the question that I've always had is, what happens if that idea up there didn't have a very vocal champion or a whole lot more than their own gut feeling to say it's important on here, but what if it really is an insightful strength or a largely unrecognized threat that hasn't become popular yet? And that to me is, again, what some of the weaknesses of a SWOT is. We get around the ideas that we all feel the most comfortable with.
I never really thought about it that way, that if everyone's just voting, it's almost a popularity contest, that if you don't have the data to back it up, subjectivity and observations and, charm could really harm this process. What about timing? When should we be doing a SWOT?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, think about the typical planning process, which is usually run out of the CFO's office, the finance and accounting organization, pull it all together. Here's the timeline. And typically the SWOT analysis is in the early stages. And shortly after that, or around that same time, whether you get the direction from the board, the president, the leadership team, there's going to be some targets that are put out there. And those targets can be expressed as percentage of growth in sales, percentage of growth in profits, direct EBITDA growth, or any other key measures that come out as a target. And then once we have those things in the rough outlines of a strategy, people go up and start doing the planning and analysis. Sales begins to put together their forecast. Okay, if we need 6% growth, what does that look like? They model it out, maybe allocate to products or product groupings. All that work then goes on. And then as that happens, the plan rolls down into the operations group. All the other operational departments, HR, IT, finance and accounting, product development, marketing, they're developing their own budgets. Finance takes all that information, rolls it up, looks at where are we at right now, compares it to the target. And now the whole series of meetings start to happen. It's like, how do we close the gap? And in some cases, accept that gap exists and it's going to be a go-get later on. And then thank God we're done with that process and we hide the plan.
You had me all the way to the end. What do you mean hide the plan? Why do all this work and hide the plan? Does that happens?
Yeah, well, you can expect that there's a lot of plans that get put together. Okay, now we know broadly what they are, all the work that goes into it. And in some organizations I've seen where they literally, like the binder is put up on the shelf and you look at it once or twice, 3 times, once a quarter after that. It's hiding the plan. You go back to running the business on a day-to-day basis. Now that's, obviously doesn't happen all the time. But when you say that our sales are going to be 5% above prior year without a whole lot of substances, how you get there, you're really planning against one of these as opposed to some better assumptions.
So not all SWOTs are bad. If you bring in data, they can be better. And SWOTs can't be forgotten, put into a 3-ring binder and left on the shelf. Is there a different place that we should do the SWOT if the timing that you've shown us is typical and not really effective?
Yeah, what I believe ought to happen, again, I'm in the data business, so I really believe that business analysis should precede all of this stuff. And people say, wait a minute, we do business analysis. Well, yeah, on a monthly basis, you're likely to have your financials, you have a business review, you have your scorecards that all tell you where you are. And a lot of times it stops right there. The business analysis tells you why you're there, and most importantly, gives you insights as to where you ought to go next. So you have to have some of that foundational understanding in place before you should even move forward into your planning process. So step 1 here, that business analysis, that's almost a capability that is running all year long in an ideal situation. Now, what I believe and what I've seen is there's a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that don't do that. They get their financials, they have the meetings with the sales team, and they say, yeah, they accept the explanation from the sales team as to what's going on, but they're not doing that analysis on an ongoing basis. But if you say you have that in place, you have the target setting, and SWOT really then becomes after that. So now we have an understanding of what's driving our business, what should we do about it, we have our targets. Now is the time to step back and bring some of that information into the SWOT analysis so that a plan emerges more naturally, which then you can start planning against. You then do the target versus plan resolution. But now you actually have a set of assumptions that you can track your plan against, your progress against as the year goes forward.
This is the type of thing that when I talk to Lynn makes me go, oh, yeah, of course, that makes so much sense. And if this kind of conversation has you intrigued, that's why the next webinar on October 14th is where we're going to dive into how to plan in a more in-depth way. So if this slide and the previous slide makes you go, maybe there's a better way, that's what the next webinar is going to be about. Okay, so we move the SWOT to a different place. How does that change the outcome?
Oh, okay, so once you're bringing data into your SWOT, you actually have the information to either overcome or confirm the biases that we all bring in here. Yes, we have a great sales message out there, and we've got a perfect marketing plan out there. The results that we've been executing against will tell us that, and it'll tell us where we're doing well, where we might be falling short. And it's going to provide those types of insights that, yes, if we're having something, some success out there, it's going to tell us where we're at. But it also then, as I mentioned before, gives you the opportunity to someone to offer a potentially controversial perspective. But now once you bring real data to dimensionalize it or provide some additional context around it, it's going to help that viewpoint get expressed a little more readily. And then finally, if you have all the data and you've got the whole data visualization capability, now this is obviously somebody like me, this is what they ultimately hope for, a whole dashboard of things that you can drill down and look at and understand more. It enables you to take things down a little bit beyond that higher level, almost in a real-time basis while the SWOT is going on.
I think we've all been in SWOTs. We've all seen what you're talking about. You're putting words into things that we all kind of know is true. We get into a room, we listen to the boss, he or she says what they think, everybody nods, it becomes what it is. And now you're injecting data and facts to maybe champion unpopular opinions or opinions that no one thought of, or to be real, opinions that the boss may or may not share. So let's see what it looks like before and after using data, like an old-fashioned SWOT and then one that uses the data magic. What does that look like?
Perfect. Yeah, so a typical SWOT, we've kind of taken take a swag at saying, hey, what do these things look like? And what's the first thing you notice here? Except for the number 3 down in threats, which is a time period, there's not a number on the page. And I've not been part of many SWOT exercises where there is a number. And some people may argue that's not the point of them. But again, I'm coming from the perspective of the SWOT has to evolve as the organization gets better about using the information available to it. But you get things like we have a strong culture. People adapted to remote. And look, we did this new product launch, or I'm sorry, we launched this new Lunch and Learn series during COVID. And so that was something that we did really, really well. Then we go through the same thing with the weaknesses, and we have the opportunities and threats. And if you look at some of these opportunities and threats and strengths, they all seem to relate to sales. So again, with my own personal bias towards sales, these are the ones that I'd love to take a look at a little bit more as we start thinking about what does this SWOT look like, where we have the qualitative sales remain strong with product A, we're well positioned for recovery, and our pipeline we think is strong. So that's all good stuff. We've got this 3-month market test, but that doesn't really raise too much of an issue right now. But let's take a look and see what this could look like in a different way when you start looking at sales a little differently with some data. And typically when you dig through someone's messy data, you're going to get some different types of insights. And in this graph, this is the traditional sales view. And I've been part of many, many organizations that do this. We got our blue line there, which is last year. The gray line represents fiscal year 20, the calendar year that we're in right now. And you see January and February started off great. We were running well ahead of last year, really close to our plan. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits. We all recognize that. And unfortunately, this is one of the companies that may have taken more of a dive when COVID hit. But March was soft. April, the bottom really fell out, and we've clawed back to some level that's well below last year. But on a year-to-date basis now, we are running 30% below plan. And so really, typical view, this will break it out by product, by geography, by brand, by product segments, any way that the company does it, or by geography, sales territory. But typically we say, okay, what's going on? Well, it's COVID. It's COVID. What do you do with that? Okay, so now we have an understanding of where our sales, we wanted them to be. We now know where they are, and we have the idea that, yeah, they're COVID. Now, there may be a little more insights behind that, but another completely different view is taking all the information you have available about those sales, and you've got information in different systems. You can take all that out and sort it out and really get down to how are your customers behaving, and how is your organization behaving relative to their behavior? Because again, it's all about relationships. When you look at this, now we kind of did this at a very high level and came out with, there's 3 groups of people out there that buy our products. They're the believers, they love us, and they stick around. We have the steadies, they shop around, and we found out they used to come back. And then we have the irregulars. All of our marketing, we capture stray customers in here. They typically tend to be one or done, one or very infrequent purchases. And so those are the 3 buckets. Now when you look at where are they at relative to behaviors, the blue line represents our plan, and the dotted line is the plan. The solid line represents their year-to-date performance through August. And we look at the behaviors of the believers, they were up in January and February, just like we were overall. They fell in the months, but you look back all the way in here, we're now at the end of August, and they are literally back to where we expected them to be. So what do we know about them going forward? We can do the same thing with the irregulars. They're tracking right along about where we expected them to be. Not a whole lot of help or hurt either way. But when you look at the behavior of the steadies, they were up here. This is what we expected from them. They fell, and except for this 1 month in June, probably a special cause of some sort, they're tracking well below plan. And so you get a completely different idea about customer behaviors, the relationships between marketing and sales and how to bring those two people together. And you almost instinctively know there's some things I have to go do in here, right now.
And an observation like this is the definition of data magic, because we've been in SWOTs before. Well, COVID, sales, but identifying something like this, that believers are great and steadies are where we need to put our focus moving forward. Lynn, that's $1 million or more observation. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and when you think about the companies who do this well, this is the type of stuff that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And this is the stuff that's happening to you as a consumer every day. In fact, I love to talk to people and ask them, do you know your customers as well as Amazon knows you? And there's only one group of people, and I'm not going to mention them, who will say yes. And they know that they know that they're not telling you the complete truth.
Yeah. All right. So you do analysis like this on virtually any sector of the business, and this is what it ends up an after SWOT. You work with the data magician. This is what a SWOT looks like. Walk us through it.
Yeah, and this represents the extra knowledge and opportunities quantifying the original intent of the SWOT. So the original intent of the SWOT is still here. We've done the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. We've just now brought another level, taking it less qualitative, more quantitative, rooted in facts of what we can really see about our business. And you see here, we've got a lot more metrics built into the SWOT. Now, again, people might say that's not the right place for them. I would submit that if it's not the right place, then you're missing an opportunity to make it all better. And we can take a look at the same way we did before, some of the things that come out of here. All the stuff that related to sales, once we started really looking at what was going on with it, 85% of our customer KPIs are being obtained. So boy, what's that doing? What does that mean? Retention is going really well for us for a group of people called the believers. We have the steadies. We have a 40% opportunity to recapture and particularly cross-sell in the South. So not only we do have the steadies as a group being down, we know specifically they are in the South. We know that our competition lowered their prices by 15%, targeting pretty much the same people that are our steadies. And so now you think about what do we need to do to respond to these things. So that's some insights that you get from a sales standpoint. But if that's been valuable to people and they've loved the fact that we've been able to do that for them, doing it once doesn't make it repeatable. So one of the things that comes out is we need IT capability to automate more of the analysis that we're doing. And oh, by the way, we don't even have an IT strategy for maximizing the return on investment of our spending. We're collecting, protecting, and storing all this information. Now we come to the conclusion we can be using a lot more of it. This is where a plan really will help you. And one of the weaknesses of our company now is that we don't have it. Looking at other areas, we talked about the fun office. People love our culture, and they adapted to life, away from the office. 75% of them surveyed were ready to come back, and they want to get back in the office. And that lunch and learn and all that stuff that we did to kind of make people feel connected while they're working from home. Man, if we learned that only 25% of the people attended a lunch and learn and only 15% people came to the virtual happy hours, what does that really tell us about what we thought we knew about our company?
So Lynn, when I see these numbers and I see a SWOT that looks like this, it reminds me that you're not for everyone. If someone's running a company and they just want to run it the way that they want to run it, they don't want you hanging around, because you're going to point out things that they believe to be true and either validate it or invalidate it. There's an accountability and an action that comes with this that kind of blows off all of the subjectivity and smoke. And you're going to give someone the real truth of what is going on. And if you deliver someone a SWOT like this, how much more effective is it for them?
Well, it's like anything else. You can show people this, and they decide they don't want to do it because it's not easy work to build this kind of capability, and it has to be a leadership imperative to say that we are going to do this, we are going to use this, and quite frankly, some of the things that I hear when talking to other people about when with their clients talking to them, it's like, if you come in and show some of this stuff, it almost could be like, okay, if the CFO's not doing this, is it that they're not doing their job? Absolutely not. It's not going to be an indictment on somebody like that, but it does take them to recognize that if they're like most CFOs that I know, or presidents, or even a sales VP, you have more questions that never seem to get answered, then you can, that list just keeps piling up. What we can do is actually help build the capability that enables you to do this, not just once, but make it repeatable efficiently.
When it really matters, use data magic, right? This
Yeah.
makes sense to me. All right, so you've got our attention. We realize now what we've been doing wrong with our SWOTs. You can help us with this. How does it work?
Yeah. Here's the next slide. Really, so from a more effective SWOT, one of the things I'd suggest you do, kind of summarize this whole thing, add the data. Take your qualitative input and support it with facts as much as possible. Actively seek out new information before you go in. And this new information, it exists throughout your organization. You think about every transaction, every interaction that happens with your customer service department, every employee engagement survey, every performance review, it comes with information that can be harvested and used to better understand what's going on. Do this before you start your planning process. Whether the SWOTs are the first step after that or the third step, just make sure you come with more information. Come with your fact book, if you will, and make sure that when you contribute to that discussion, you actually can talk from a position of fact, not belief. And doing that, you'll actually add context. And when you start getting into, well, what is the nuance of the competitive response rate, or where one of our suppliers is having a problem? If you come in and say, there's not just a problem, but they're missing 55% of their order ship complete to us, that's a bad thing. And then, whereas I think a lot of people think that this is a quick couple hour, half day exercise, it needs more time. It warrants more time, because while you have all that brain power in the room, you're bringing relatively new information into it. So let's use the brain power while they're there. Again, increasing the efficiency and the effectiveness of the SWOT thing. You not only have new information, you have the key decision makers right there. And so really the question now is, when you go look back at the opportunities from the two different SWOTs, which is right for you, the traditional one or the one that's really more data-driven? I would suspect that if you go through it and you do the data-driven one, it's going to be clunky the first time or two, but the time after that, and the time after that, as you get used to it, you will end up with a much better SWOT process, one that has actually evolved from the 1960s.
Love it. Love it. We have a few questions and time for a few. If there's one you'd like to ask, drop it into the chat. Amanda wants to know, why don't companies use more data in their SWOTs already?
Yeah, a lot of times it's just the way we do things. I once worked with a business owner and he said, Bob, it's great. You're up 6%. How? You didn't know. Yeah. And so it's just a matter of getting into it. I'm successful. I don't need to do this. Or I've not really thought about how I'm going to do this. So I just don't have the capability in-house to get people to think about doing things in a different way. And again, it has to come from a leader. And whenever you're trying to do any kind of big data initiatives, I don't care whether you are a Fortune 500 company or like the last of them, or just a brand new company starting out. If you don't have a plan for what you want to get out of this, and what you want to do, and commit to not only making good data, but keeping the data itself clean and healthy and all the stuff that goes along with it. There's two sides of this. There's the business side and the tech side of it. Tech side says we must have good data for us to be able to make something good. The business says, I just need a good set of cookies. I don't care what the flowers look like. It's not an either or. You have to have both sides of that. So it's challenging. It's difficult, and it's a road that they haven't been down before, but thanks for the question.
Cookies. Now I want some cookies. That sounds good. And echoing what Michael dropped into the chat, I think another reason why they don't use data is that people overestimate their understandings of trends and really what's going on. Would you think that that's fair? People think they know the answer when in reality they might not?
I worked with a sales guy once, and was when I first moved to Wisconsin, and this guy had been the VP of sales for 25 years. And every December he'd start up, yep, it's going to be another big month, another big month. December is always our best month. Believe that the first year, because I didn't know better, was skeptical the third year or the second year. Going into the third year, said, let's sit down. And I had just a simple sheet of paper, months across the top, years down the side, 11 years worth of data, and said, okay, this is how this works. If March is less than February, March is red. If June is bigger than May, June is green. And I had the first 9 months. So, okay, you get how this is working? Yep, got it. So what does December look like? It's all red. What does it mean? I guess I don't know what the hell I'm talking about after all. And he actually was spot on in his assessment, but he was projecting the last 2 weeks of the month where the bad behaviors built into our sales comp system and our distributor trade program drove a whole bunch of extra volume from January into December, happened every single year, which meant their product was out in the marketplace in a way, and it just disrupted everything. And out of that one conversation and that one sheet of paper, that was where we started a progress that took us a couple years to finish, where the whole business got built into 6 KPIs from a marketing sales standpoint. Those 6 KPIs drove strategy development, they drove the sales incentive system, and they drove the design of a brand new trade program system. When you have everybody making money off the same 6 numbers coming out of one system, calculated exactly the same way, magic happened, literally.
Love it. Question from Chris McCardle. Can data to profit help clients identify steadies and other descriptors within the client base before even getting to the number crunching?
Yeah, really, it's a matter of pulling together what are all the attributes you know. Typically, your sales system, that's your sales, your billing system. You begin to look at behaviors in there. So if you have somebody who's buying from you every week, like the Amazon truck seems to be coming to our house with increasing frequently during this whole COVID thing. So we are now a steady or they love us type of customer. So you can look at their purchase behavior. If you have a company that has 10 different product lines, how many of your customers are buying 1, 2, 3, or all 10 of them? So there's some of that information. And then there's all the information that you have out of your CRM system that can be harvested as well. The number of customer interactions, how often do your salespeople go to see them? Again, you get the insights as to what's the behaviors of the sales team and how do they reward the different classifications. When we did this once before and we had a group of people called price value, we actually found the salespeople loved going to the price value people because these are the people they were eventually going to get. They love the challenge of them. But by their very, very definition, as soon as somebody came and offered them another nickel, guess what? They were gone. So yeah, great question. And that's really sitting down and understanding the information that you have available to us and then seeing how we can begin to pull it together. A lot of it's the advanced statistics, which I am not the advanced statistics guy, but I certainly know people that we will bring in to help do that type of analysis.
So at this point, you probably realize that you're not doing SWOTs the right way. I know that I haven't. So if you're curious about having Lynn help you, Lynn, you've set aside some time in the next couple of days to talk with folks in case they want to learn how you might be able to help. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. So we've gone through some of the questions, and then I missed the slides here. Sorry about that. Yeah, what we're going to do is you drop me a line, and I will commit within the next couple of days to have a 30-minute call with you to talk about how your business is working today. If you're starting the planning process, what can we do to help you get started with that? And see where we go from there. But it's a free complimentary assessment. We can do it via Zoom. If you're open for business, I'd be happy to meet you somewhere in your own offices if you want to have a couple other key people around. And we can begin talking about an assessment of where you're currently at and how far you want to go and how fast. And the interesting thing about this, and you start this, there is so much you can do. And my advice to anybody who's starting this, don't try to lay out this whole scope. Pick one question that you want to answer, get that win, look at that one, do it well, show people the benefits, realize the benefits for yourself. Then let's talk about the next step and the next step after that.
Can you imagine that feeling coming to Lynn saying, hey, I think this is the issue. And he'll nod his head and he'll look at your data and then point behind you and say, no, it's actually that over there. And it's the insight that you need to take your business to the next level. It's going to be amazing. So get a hold of Lynn if you want to start that SWOT process and learn about it. And then come back because on October 14th at 11:30 a.m., the Behaviors of Business webinar series will continue. How is your 2021 business plan coming along? So we're kind of going to build this together when we're really going to talk about how Lynn can help you, and also how we can help you build your business for next year. So the next thing you're going to see from us is a feedback survey because, hello, we need data too. We want to make this great for you every single time. So Lynn, before we sign off, any final word on SWOTs or the overall program?
Take this, and even if you're just taking that first step and, maybe you're getting ready to do this very, very soon, even if you just want to have a one-on-one conversation, just say, how could I begin the process in my own business? Because I may not be the decision maker, but give me some insights of how we can get started, and I'd love to have that conversation with you.
Well, it sounds great, Lynn. Thanks for all the insight today. I'm Pat Miller, the Idea Coach. Thank you for joining us for the Behavior of Business webinar, Why SWOTs Can Be a Waste of Time with Lynn Karazi, the data magician of Data to Profit. Let's get to work. Let's start planning, and we'll see you back here on October 14th. See you
All
next
right.
time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.